Maine's sky, Maine's oceans, the mountains. Maine has been really, to me, like poetry. Every time I go hiking, I feel alive. I was born in Kurdistan, Iran, a small, dusty border town between Iran and Iraq, and I was the youngest of 9 children, so I had a happy childhood. Of course, I was too innocent to understand that in a decade or two, that peacefulness of my hometown would go away. I think fate has some other plans for me in mind, and I was about to graduate from college when the so-called Islamic Revolution of 1979 happened, followed by war between Iran and Iraq. Basically, I became a stateless person. I had no country to go back to. And that's when I applied for refugee status. I arrived in Portland, Maine, Memorial Weekend, 1985. And since then, it's been home.
The fact is we're a very large state, but as big as we are, we've never seemed to have lost that kind of small town feel, the small town mentality that's really been defined by our history. Androscoggin Bank was founded in 1870 for a specific purpose, because the population of Lewiston grew as a result of all the immigrants that came to work in the newly built textile mills. So the community leaders came together to form the bank, but they did something really interesting. They decided to form us as a mutual bank, which means we're essentially owned by our depositors. And any profits that the bank earns are immediately reinvested back in the community, either into new clients or into philanthropy or any other way we can serve the community. I think because of our unique origin story, that's been infused into our DNA and is carried forward in the spirit of the company.
So this was my first apartment. Here I was finally home. After years of being displaced and not being sure where I would end up, and every time I got the glimpse of the ocean, which is to this side, I was mesmerized at how gorgeous it was and how the colors changed. And I would just picture myself as a permanent resident of this community.
I felt fortunate, and I still do, that I was offered a space at the table, that I became an American. I'm an immigrant advocate, an educator, and a writer. Really what drives my passion to help immigrants is because I came as one. I was born a Muslim, and I continue to be a Muslim. We have thousands of Muslims living in Maine. Because of their religion, there's some requirements that makes it a little harder for them to apply for a mortgage or take a loan. So this was one barrier that I thought we could address.
I think it's safe to say the only constant in banking is the pace of change. You have to be nimble if you want to stay relevant to your clients. So we reached out to some leaders we respected, and we asked them if they'd be willing to collaborate with us. The Islamic faith has some very specific guidance and principles about financial activities, and we were informed that the Muslim community could not utilize the conventional mortgage offered by banks. So when they identified this challenge, it took us back to our founding legacy of being formed specifically to help the first generation of new Mainers buy homes. So we were immediately intrigued and interested to see how we could move that forward.
I came to you and I said it was about gaining a sense of ownership. And they have this American dream, that a version of it, and that one day I'll become a homeowner.
It wasn't just designing a solution, it was building a bridge to the community. The conversation we're having here, the work that we started with so many people around us will have that kind of generational impact. That would be a wonderful legacy for us to leave.
I was born and raised in Egypt. I was living a normal life there, a family of 5, mom and dad and 2 brothers. I'm in the middle. And my life was very good in Egypt. Nothing was missing except that I am always looking for more. I'm never satisfied. And this is what made me take the adventure and the journey to the US. When I moved to Maine, I didn't know whether I would find Islamic financing or not. So I was reluctant to buy until somehow by coincidence I was at the mosque and a friend of mine told me that Androscoggin is giving a presentation, and I was very impressed that our needs are being considered. It was really, really a big deal for me that a typical bank is considering the smaller community.
We first began by working with finance professionals in the Islamic faith, and we came out the other side with a structure that we believe was designed to comply within those stringent guidelines, and at the same time would offer the same costs and benefits to the bank and the same economic costs and benefits to the home purchaser as a conventional mortgage.
So the Islamic mortgage, they are compliant with the Islamic beliefs. It was explained to me in a way that it is similar to rent to own. So I am paying rent, but after I finish it, it is going to be my home. And my home is a tiny little condo. And it is exactly what I have dreamt for. I feel so much at peace and at home, and I feel the tranquility that I do not want to lose this forever. I can go and travel, but it is a place where I always come back to.
Home is where you're loved. Home is where you belong, where you feel safe. Home is where you feel you're part of society. It's about offering people hope and opportunities. So here we are. Thank you, Neil. It's been so wonderful to have this journey together, and I'm delighted that we have this opportunity to share this amazing film with you all, and in the process get into how this happened, how this came about. So I want to thank you, Neil, again for your support and for your not giving up on us or not giving up on the process, which is, that's not who you are. I have a couple of questions, and you might be in trouble, Neil, because I have quite a few pages of questions for you. This is supposed to be a conversation, but I couldn't resist having some questions for Neil, and I'm sure that Neil has some questions for me. When I'm thinking about Androscoggin Bank, I'm always reminded of your amazing program, the Empowerment Partner Program, that I was a beneficiary. Some backstory here, I was executive director of the Greater Portland Immigrant Welcome Center, and we went to the bank to apply for a grant, and Neil came to meet with us and described this revolutionary way of granting us grants, that we didn't have to do this year after year. We didn't have to go back after 12 months and make a case why we needed the money and all that. And frankly, it's quite a revolutionary way. It helped us as a small to mid-sized nonprofit. And so I would love to ask you, how did that come about?
Thank you, my friend. Pleasure to be with you. One of the many wonderful outcomes of this journey was the opportunity to work with Reza, my good friend, and deepen our relationship. And I'll also just say about this film is this film is not simply about a banking product, right? This is about the latest version of the oldest Maine story, which makes us different, which is about Mainers coming together to help their neighbors, right? It's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years. I will also say that I just want to give credit to my team is here. This film came about because we got a call back in October from the BBC, said, we selected you, we looked at 700 stories, and we selected your company, want to profile in a documentary about businesses using, companies using business as a force for good. And Nicole Haggerty and Josh Ricker, our massive two-person marketing team, navigated that, and we got a call a week later from CNBC saying, hey, we'd like to do a documentary on you. So we won't talk about that one tonight, but that's out there as well. And they navigated with these two large international companies who decided to come to Maine 3 days apart to shoot. So just a great testimony to our mighty team. And on the empowering partners, so the long story short, we were formed in 1870 with this unique approach of serving our communities.
And fast forward, 150 years, the world changed, and we felt the need, we needed to reinvent ourselves to make sure that we stayed around and stayed relevant to our communities, to our clients. And we decided to take what we call our multi-stakeholder approach. Rather than focusing on making money for shareholders, which we have none, or just making a profit, we decided we want to create extraordinary value for 3 stakeholders who are most integral to our long-term success. Our clients, of course, our communities, but also our employees, because they create value for both of those stakeholders. And our belief was if we focused on that over the long term and we ran our companies with excellence, the financial results would follow, and then we could reinvest them. So the financial results are not our mission, they're the fuel for our mission. And we operated that. In 2021, we got serious. We went for and achieved what's called a B Corp certification, which is LEED, like equivalent of LEED certified for buildings or organic certified for food, except it's a rigorous certification about how well you treat your employees, how well you serve your clients, how well you serve your communities, how environmentally sustainably you operate, and how rigorous and transparent your governance processes are. So it was a perfect framework for what we were doing. And I give that by way of background because when we did this, we started by focusing on our culture. And the idea was we wanted to attract the most talented people in the community. And we wanted to create a culture that would do that. And a real important part of that was inclusion. Because in order to have access to the most talented people in our communities, we had to remove any barriers that would prevent people or deter people from joining us. And once they joined us, we had to make sure that everybody had an equal opportunity to achieve their full potential and help, make their full contribution to the company. And that stood us well. We're really proud of the diverse culture that we have, and it's helped us from a business perspective. But so focusing on championing our employees was one thing, focusing on our clients was another, but companies have experience with that. When it came to our community and we said, how are we going to deliver extraordinary value to our communities, how do you go beyond just writing a check? And so the concept of the Empowering Partners program was to see if we could reinvent how a for-profit company worked with a nonprofit. Because the current for-profit dynamic, or nonprofit dynamic, many of you will identify, is a funder, a bank, or a company challenges folks to compete through grant writing. The chances, the work is hard, the chances of winning are small. And if you're fortunate enough to win, you're often told all the ways you can't spend the money, which implies that we can't trust you, you don't know what you're doing. And then we want you to report out in triplicate how you spent every penny. But the power dynamics and the lack of foundation of trust and condescension just didn't feel right to us. And so we sought out in the community a number of organizations that had dynamic leaders that were working with marginalized communities and had a diversity overlay. And of course, Reza with the Portland Welcome Center was one of them. And we asked you all to partner with us to reinvent, and I think people were a little shocked. They're like, what are you talking about? But where we came out of that was to say, how about if we don't have a grant application, we have a conversation, and if we decide to work together, we'll do multi-year funding so you can budget it. We won't tell you how to spend it because we trust you're an expert, and nonprofits do more with less than any for-profit company. And we don't need a report. Can we just sit down and have another conversation? And once we moved all of that financial discussion off, which is often the beginning and the end of the conversation between a funder and a nonprofit, then with humility we approached these leaders like Reza and said, can you teach us to be more impactful in our communities because you're doing amazing work? And in the conversation with Reza and also Claude Rwange from Prosperity, Maine, you all came back to us and said, hey, we identified this challenge in our mission that maybe you can help with. The fact that our Muslim neighbors can't use conventional bank products. So you want to talk a little bit about, share that perspective?
Thank you, Neil. Absolutely. But before I say that, I just want to say a few words about the Empowerment Partner Program and add to what Neil had to say. This was based on mutual respect and trust. And I've never seen anything like that, to be honest. And the multi-year grant not only helped us not to worry about going back year after year, but it also, in terms of not disrupting our programs. So we could go out and hire the right people, the qualified people, plan our programs, which were needed by the community. So I just wanted to say that I still am grateful that Androscoggin Bank really showed us the way, that there is an alternative way to going back again and again and asking for money.
In terms of answering your question, Neil, as an advocate for immigrants, and I still think that my job is to identify and address the barriers that our new neighbors are facing, be it language, cultural, religious, finding job, and home ownership as being part of the American dream. Regardless of where you were born, we all want to own a home at some point. And our new neighbors, Muslim immigrants, were facing this barrier that they could not use the conventional mortgage programs. And because of, again, their faith traditions requirement that they could not receive or pay interest. And this really prevented them from becoming homeowners. And home ownership to us as advocates for this population has been about gaining a sense of ownership, that they feel included, valued, and they also start establishing roots in that community. There's pride that comes with home ownership. And as such, and it's also about building home equity and creating generational wealth. So for a number of reasons, we realized that this was a huge barrier. So with my colleagues, we went to Neil, but here's really what's important, that he gave us the time to talk about these things. And because till then, really, we had gone to the private sector and asked them for money, and they would, as Neil said, they would write us a check. There was no relationship. And again, to this day, I'm grateful to other founders. But this is a new way. It was really the power dynamic shifted, and we became partners. And so we could tell Neil and his colleagues and the senior leadership team at Androscoggin Bank what kept us up at night, that this barrier was huge. Tens of thousands of Muslim immigrants live in Maine, and for them this was a huge issue, and as such, we had to do something about it. And Neil was that partner who joined our efforts, and in the process, I learned so much, and we all we felt really good. The first couple who bought a home using this program, I remember Neil and I, a few other of our friends went for the housewarming party, and just to see the family enjoying the new home, that was very rewarding. If I may, I want to switch and ask you a question, Neil. I, for one, want to learn more about B Corp certification, and I don't know how many of you know about this process. And would you please care to tell us about B Corp certification?
I'm a little nervous because Chris Lyon's here and he's our resident expert, so he'll tell me if I make a mistake. But the B Corp certification is run by a nonprofit called B Labs, and they were formed in about 2009. And they were formed for a reason. There was a concern for folks that wanted to align their purchases of goods or services with their values, but they couldn't get past the advertising, pink washing, greenwashing, et cetera, to know who was actually walking the walk. And so they conceived of this rigorous certification program, one, to kind of confirm for consumers and others who was actually living by their representations, and two, to try and create a community of like-minded companies that could trade best practices and elevate each other. I will say we get audited as a bank by everybody. We have auditors in the bank, on a weekly basis, and the audit that they put us through is incredibly rigorous. They care about it tremendously. I'll also say the most famous B Corp in the world is Patagonia, and what's interesting is Yvon Chouinard was born right in Lewiston. He lived there till he was 12, and he sent us a personal email congratulating us when we achieved our B Corp certification. The other thing is that, accepting the certification is not for the faint of heart. When we accepted it, we were the only 9th bank in the country. I think there's now 14. It was a challenge, but you have to be recertified every 3 years. And the hook is that they raise the bar. So they kind of make it more difficult. So you have to also commit to this idea of continuous improvement. And above all, it's about authenticity. You can't get there by, trying to check the box on questions. You kind of have to live this in the true spirit in which it's conceived.
Thank you, Neil, and I promise you all that there would be time for question and answer. Neil, I have a question
for years we had been trying, and we've been trying to resolve this issue. And what made your bank decide to take the challenge on? I'm always curious, because again, we had gone to others and found the door shut on our face. I'm curious what made Androscoggin Bank to look at this and with interest and help us.
Well, one thing I learned is when you take the risk of asking people how you can help, they might tell you. But the second reason, there are a number of reasons. First, when you describe this, there's like perfect. This takes us back to our founding legacy. We were founded to help the first generation of New Mainers buy their homes. That just felt so holistic and wonderful. The second thing is like I have a unique role. I have the privileged responsibility of being the CEO of a 155-year-old institution. So that privileged responsibility is to also take a multi-generational view of our company and our role in our communities. And when I did that and looked back at what the first generation of New Mainers accomplished, I see New Mainers obviously in the room tonight, and these are the French Canadians and the Irish, faced discrimination and exclusion and barriers, but they had opportunities and made the most of those opportunities. And I'll say somewhat with the bank's help, but really on their own, they built their lives and they built our cities. And it really is amazing. And if I look in my, kind of anecdotally in my own company up in our Lewiston, I'd say 60 to 70% of my employees have French surnames. So they're likely direct descendants, and they built it. And now if I look forward, we're an aging state. We need the vitality of new people. We need the talent, energy of our newest New Mainers coming here, who are immensely talented and driven. And we need to capture that to secure our future for the state of Maine. And again, if we don't remove the barriers to let people get traction and where they're starting to get in the middle class, to get the education that they desire, we're going to hurt ourselves, right? And again, this is the concept of mutuality itself. We're all related. We're all connected. We can only all thrive when we each thrive. And so that was another reason. And the third piece was just the opportunity. How unique in life if you can have the opportunity to work in a company and have the opportunity to do something beyond making money, to have a real impact. And I will share with you that, that first housewarming party we went to, if you remember the children taking our hands and showing us with pride as they took us to their rooms, their own bedrooms. But the side story about Maine, which is just as interesting, is they moved from Lewiston into New Gloucester in January, and they had a massive snowstorm. They're having this big event, and of course they hadn't been to Home Depot to buy shovels yet. And when they came out in the morning, their neighbors had shoveled their driveway for them. Like, that's Maine. So incredibly meaningful. So, and I'm a little crazy. This was such a big challenge that when the first thing I did was call the American Bankers Association and say, we want to do this thing. I know some people have done it in other parts of the country. It can't be that hard. And can I talk to some of your mortgage experts? They put 5 or 6 experts on the phone, and they lectured us for an hour for all the reasons it couldn't be done. And then we hung up, and some of my teams, well, that's too bad. I was like, no, that's a moat. We're going to figure that out. So there's a little bit of a, we love a challenge at the bank, and so we couldn't resist this. And we're so glad we did. It's been such a journey.
Thank you, Neil. I'm happy that you got it done. So it wasn't my charm, my personal charm.
Well, it's hard to say no to you, Ray.
Well, I just wanted to
I wanted to
clarify.
make it a little easier to help you with.
Thank you. You touched on it was difficult, but how hard was it to go through this process? Would you elaborate, please?
It was very difficult. As Reza indicated, in the Muslim faith, Islamic financing principles, you can't pay interest. You can pay rent, you can pay profit, you can pay fees, but to sit at the intersection of federal, state, consumer banking law, which is all built around interest, and the Islamic faith, which I didn't know any about at the beginning of this journey, and trying to navigate that was incredibly challenging. But I'll tell you what, in all honesty, finding the solution for the product was one part of the challenge. The second piece was the trust building that we had to do with the community that was integral to our success. And that's where you certainly were our guide and our conscience and our advisor at Reza, which was tremendously valuable. But one of the challenges I think we have as a bank for folks coming to the country is everyone comes with their own legacy impressions of banks from their other countries.
and it's wide and it's diverse, but it's not always trusted. In a lot of countries, there's not a lot of trust there. So we had to earn trust in the communities. We started with public meetings, and then we were invited into the mosques. We met with leaders. We had leaders into the bank. It was a long process of trust building, which was equally important. And not more difficult. It was very enjoyable, but it was certainly an obstacle to a hurdle to do this. It was a really important part. And you and Claude were wonderful about guiding us, making introductions, advising us, in terms of kind of cultural norms and expectations, so we could show up as our true selves and build those relationships.
Thank you, Neil. If only you knew that my network support, some of them are sitting here. Dekha, our state representative, and Marwa, and Isha, that I would run to them and say, could we have that dinner organized at the mosque? Or we had one at Gateway Community Services and one in Lewiston, and folks showed up. And so again, as you said, it's really about gaining the new mayor's trust. And in many countries outside of the United States, including the country where I come from, the banks are owned by the state. So we don't support the banks in oppressive societies, because we don't want the bank to know everything about us. The state would know about it. So in fact, as immigrants, when we come to this country, that's one of the really paradigm shifts that happens, that we learn that we could in fact trust the bank, that every information is confidential, and the government would not find out about how much money we have or how much we owe and all that. But I still am curious to know what made these projects so meaningful to you as a leader, Mayor.
Again, I think it certainly was the challenge. It was the alignment with our mission. It was also the opportunity to be invited into a new community. It really was incredibly meaningful to be invited into the mosque, to Ramadan dinners. One of the highlights was, I think 2 years ago, there was an overlap between the Jewish holiday of the Seder dinner and the Ramadan dinner, if that's correct. And the two communities came together at the Jewish Community Association to break bread, which was unbelievable. So I think it was really the challenge and the opportunity to kind of be invited into a new community. And then for us, eventually we were fortunate enough to have folks that join the bank from that community and bring in more clients. And the relationships, it's enriched our culture, it's enriched our experience. It is really unique. And the warmth with which I was received and our team has been received has been amazing. And so I think, I'm not sure we knew that at the time. We just knew, one of our kind of core values is doing the right things because it's the right thing to do. And you kind of trust your heart, and things follow from there.
Thank you. What's next, Neil?
My team's asking the same question. They're looking like, what are we going to do next? So, we've been humbled that this story has resonated as much as it has. The fact that the BBC picked it up, and NPR, et cetera, and we've been approached by folks that want to support this type of work that we're doing. And so the idea too is like, how do we scale our impact, and how do we invite people into the work? So we've recently launched what we call our Sustainable Deposit Program, which allows folks to place a deposit with us instead of another bank, just same rate, same FDI insurance, but we link it to lending done here in Maine in certain categories of loans, other underserved areas. So women, minority-led businesses, renewable energy, rural healthcare, clean water. These all align with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. And so folks know their dollars sleep at night. They're being put out to the Somali Bantu Association, Maine Works, a number of other worthy organizations out there. And we're starting to attract a lot of depositors there, which just gives us more fuel and more power to expand our reach. We were also rolling out a new version of our mortgage solution, because part of engaging and treating multiple stakeholders with respect is about deep listening. And as part of this process, engaging with the community, there were parts about the solution we had that worked, and there were other parts that weren't as desirable. So we actually went back and did another one, and that was a whole nother harder journey, and we're ready to roll that out. But we also came forward with a new deposit product that we're excited about as well, which is incredibly, I would say, one of the most difficult things I've worked on in my professional career, and I've had a long career, but again, one of the most meaningful. So
we're in the final stages with the regulators of clearing those, and we're looking forward to rolling those out, hopefully in the next 60 to 90 days.
Thank you, Neil. So I want to make sure I understand it correctly. So as I said earlier, Muslims cannot pay interest or receive interest. So as a Muslim member of the community, I have some money to deposit in a savings account. And since I cannot receive interest, I could direct the bank to send the earnings from the deposit to a nonprofit of my choice or to a cause of my choice.
That may be one feature we put of it, but it really is that we could pay, instead of interest, some shared revenue from some non-interest bearing revenue streams at the bank. So you would not be receiving interest, but you'd be receiving a participation of some revenue. But we are looking at other add-on pieces like that. Reza.
Well, thank you, Mr. Solution. I'm going to call you that. And how are we doing with time? Do we still have time for question and answer? Oh, we don't. I'm so sorry. And I thank you so much again, and I want to make sure that if Neil has any final words. I have a request. Androscoggin Bank has a table. So if you would kindly visit the table to learn more about this program and meet some of Neil's colleagues and my best friends, Scott, Muhammad, and among others. So please visit the table.
So I just want to thank my good friend Reza for participating in this film. More importantly, I think he has a career ahead of him, but also for being a partner on this journey, because we could not have done it without him, without Claude as well. And thank you all for listening to the story. We're here. Any questions that you have, we look forward to meeting you. We have a great team here today as well. So thanks for your attention tonight.